Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, and if this is your first time tuning in to this podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that will help you learn more about yourself as an educator and hopefully will inspire you to come back for more. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I appreciate the support and hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get into the main event for today, just some reminders. If you are on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes. Also, if you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, we ask that you subscribe there as well. And for those who have been asking about how we can support this platform, Identity Talk, we have two platforms that we use where we receive donations. You can go to Cash App, where we use our handle $ID Talk4ED, or you can go to Venmo, where you can use our handle @ Kwame SM. That's KWAMESM. And for those who want to catch up on past episodes and also watch future ones, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is under my name, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, or you can go to our main website at identitytalk4educators.com. Appreciate the love. And I have one more announcement here, and it's a new book. So for those who were at the cover reveal a few days ago, you learned that I have a new book coming out, and it's called Learn to Relearn, Supporting Identity in a Culturally Affirming Classroom. And this is the book that I believe is needed for these times that we're in. If you're an educator or just a human that's all about affirming and honoring the humanity of young people, this is the book for you. If you're an educator that is all about honoring the intersections of your students' identities and figuring out ways in which you can bring them to light in the classroom environment and beyond, this is the book for you. And it is now out for pre-order on Amazon and real soon other book retailers worldwide. And special thanks to Stenhouse and Rutledge team for making it all possible to bring this work to life and helping me get this vision out there to the world. And I hope that you are able to have that in your libraries when it does finally come out. So thank you all for the support. 3 years in the making, and we're finally here. So appreciate that. All right, now let's get to our main event. So for those who know me, for those who've been listening to this platform for almost 5 years now, you know that I started my career as a middle school math teacher. And even before I got into teaching, I was studying as a mathematics major in college. That's what I studied, and that's what got me through college. I grew up loving math. I grew up wanting to be the best mathematician. It was just one of those subjects that came easily for me. And then over the course of time, things started to change. I started to experience some adversity, which ultimately took away my love for math, which I would then regain back through teaching later on. But it played a huge role in changing my career trajectory, if you will. And I'll share more about that when we get into our conversation with today's guest, who is a STEM advocate. She is the founder of STEM for Real. She also has done work with STEM teachers, and she is all about helping us figure out how do we use STEM education as a vehicle to make opportunities equitable for students of color and others. So we're going to talk with today's guest, Dr. Leena Bakshi McLean to talk with us about her new book, STEM for All, and all the cool work she's doing through STEM for Real. So let's bring Dr. Leena on to talk with us. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor.
Well, thank you for accepting the invitation. It's so funny because when somebody brought your name up, I was like, you know what? I think I followed Dr. Leena already on IG. And then I looked at your work. I'm like, oh yeah, that's her. That's the same person. So to finally meet you in person, well, virtually, and to be able to have this conversation, it's an honor.
Absolutely. I love when the internet from all corners of the internet can bring us together.
Yes, for sure. So I know I've already shared a little bit of your story, but before we get into the nitty gritty, I love to start from the beginning, as I do with all my guests here on Identity Talk for Educators Live. We all have a story that led us into this work called education. And I'm interested in learning from you who or what inspired you to want to become an educator. Maybe it was a chain of events, maybe it was that one pivotal moment that just got you here. But let us know what it was for you.
Yes, and I love this question because it's a question that I often ask myself and we ask our teachers, why are we here? How did we get here? Is it for the booming salary that teachers get, saying with a dash of sarcasm? Is it for the benefits? Like why? What brings us here? And there has to be some pull that starts. So for me, I have a very non-eventful story. I thought that it would be great for me to start teaching as kind of a let me just try it before maybe I go into medical school or do something else. So for me, it started off as I'm just gonna do this for now and then we'll see what happens. And after that first week, I said, all right, this is it. I'm not going anywhere. I just put in way too much work. And now I want to see the return. I want to see that the bloom in my students and everything. And I'm sure many of our educators can connect with that is being able to see the return really in our investments and the time and the emotion that we pour into our students. So for me, that's why I became a teacher. And it was even more powerful that I got to become a teacher at the same school district where I went to school. So that was even better. I got to be a teacher to the feeder school from my high school.
Awesome. And let's stay there because that's actually the next question. It's about your schooling. So we went through this K-12 schooling and we understand what some of the ramifications are of going through this schooling, some of the good, some of the bad. Well, what I'm curious to know is what were some of the, if any, internal or external struggles that you had as far as being able to embrace your identity, who you are authentically, whether it's in the classroom or even outside of that space?
And I think about this all the time because being a having a so one, I'm a first generation student here, and my parents were immigrants. So having that identity, I was always told I never learned any other Indian language. It was only English. And the idea was you are in America, you need to learn English, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
And so much of it was I need to polish my identity and and I guess I was told not to be as Indian. I was told to be American and not realizing what that even means. So much of that was in my head. My identity was just playing fisticuffs with each other because I really didn't know what to embrace. And I think as I got through, high school and college and everything, I think that was really where I wanted to come into my own and say, actually, no, I can be Indian and I can be American. And there has to be a way that we can foster it where everyone feels that way.
Mm. And having that Indian identity, did you experience people feeling like, oh, well, you're a STEM person because you're Indian, or trying to make that connection?
You would think that because there's the stereotype that, oh,
Right.
well, math people or Indian people do math. In middle school, I don't think anyone had, when they saw me, they saw, well, you're not white, you're not black, I don't know what you are, you're foreign. And so all throughout K through 8, I was a foreigner. I didn't even have a chance to like embrace the stereotype that came with my identity because
Right.
I was a foreigner. So I was proving to people that no, I was born here. I was born in LA, and I only speak English, but I was still being called names and things like camel jockey, which I had never even seen a camel before. So just, I think that was a lot of it. And then when I went into high school, I think for me, having those conversations with my parents and my grandparents about study, 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 and do work and do homework, and I think for me it was, this is my ticket out of here. I gotta get out of here, and that's where I kind of embraced that identity. So I think it wasn't more so the external from the outside, it's more so from my family side. Yeah, we do math and we study, so keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely some parallels even in my own family as well. Um, so yes, we're here and we'll eventually be talking about STEM. And I would assume that somewhere down the road in your K-12, STEM just came into your life. So when and how did that happen? What was that moment for you?
For me, one, I thought that I had to love STEM, right? It was all those conversations at home like, okay, if you want to go to medical school, you better love science, you better love math. And I'm like, oh, I better love it. This is it. And so it just so happened that I did. Like, I'd go into science and we'd be growing plants or doing animal dissections or something like that. And so I always felt fascinated. However, one of the things that I always think about, so when I went into my school as a student, I didn't realize all of the privileges that came with it. Like, I was
Mm,
tracked into an honors track, and I was told this is the pathway for you, and everyone just kind of told me, and I just kind of went with it. And then I came back as a teacher, and that's when, our administration said, all right, these are all your students. You're responsible for all of them. And I said, of course, and I look, everyone is tracked. I had an honors class. I had the regular education class. And then I had the special education class. And so, again, even with those labels, I feel so uncomfortable saying them, where every single one had their track, and yet we all had their test scores to show for it. We had to, make sure that they were achieving. Well, let's start there. We're tracking people as students starting at 5th grade, and then by the time they get into 8th grade, they've already decided who is in the general ed classroom, who is honors, based on, well, he's really quiet or she's really quiet, and there's no substance there. So I think a lot of that's when I realized, wow, I happened to win the education lottery because I was in the track that supported education versus everyone else was, all right, fend for yourself. And I think that in and of itself is a huge disadvantage when we think about STEM.
mm. So when you think about those moments, those memories of you being tracked, and also your classmates as well, does that help to inform the work that you do now? Being an advocate for STEM, being someone that's all about equity and making sure that the opportunities are fair across the board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when I was a teacher, for example, and I had a student that was in the general education classroom, and I just noticed that she was performing very well at the top of my class, and I thought, wow, well, I wonder if you should be in our honors class. So I made the recommendation to move her into honors. But what if there were other students in that general ed class that I didn't see, or somehow, and then they didn't have the opportunity to demonstrate where they were? And then I'm thinking, well, what if everyone in that honors class was in the general education class? What would that look like? And so, and don't get me wrong, I know that there are tracks like for advanced placement and for IB and things like that at the high school level. What I'm talking about is that the tracking starts at the end of fifth grade, if not sooner. And that's where I think we're losing a lot of our students. So I think memories like that, where I look at specific students and some are recommended and some aren't. And it's all based on the right place at the right time with the right teacher recommendation. And that just doesn't seem very equitable to me.
And I want to stay there for a second. So we talk about um, the school to STEM career pipeline. But I want to fast forward to higher ed, right? So I know for you, you studied integrated biology during your undergrad. I was a math major during my undergrad. And you went on to still continue down that track of STEM. And in my case, I was a math teacher for many years, but now I've kind of segued into a different space that's not as mathy. So I can remember being in school, and more times than not, in my 5 years of undergrad, I think 9% of the time I was either the only Black student in my math classes or one of the few. So it was hard to really make connections with people. It was hard to build community. Everything was very individualistic. And I struggled for most of those 5 years, really struggled to the point where I decided, yeah, I cannot see myself doing a master's in, let's say, algebra, because that's my favorite strand, like quantitative algebra or differential algebra, or going into like those deeper, complex strands of math. I easily just gave up and said, I'm going to just go ahead and go into teaching and do middle to high school level math, which I enjoyed immensely. But then I start to wonder, what if I had a mentor? What if I had somebody who looked like me telling me, you know what, it's tough right now, Kwame, but I can see you pursuing a doctorate or doing a master's in math. I want you to keep going. So that brings me to this question. What can we do, not just at the college level, but even earlier than that, to try to fix the issues that are perpetuating this school to STEM career pipeline that we're seeing in so many of our districts?
Ooh, that is the question. And that
Yeah.
is the question that we have been tirelessly wanting to answer because of the broken pipeline, the broken pathways that we see. So one of the things that I talk about all the time is starting at elementary school. In elementary, our students do not get daily science instruction. They're lucky if they get it once a week.
Mm.
Some A lot of elementary schools, they use a science specialist model, where they have a science specialist that comes in, and that serves as a preparation period for the K-5 teachers, maybe K-6. So the classroom teachers, they get a break, and they send their students to science. Unfortunately, with that sort of thinking, and it's not their fault, classroom teachers think that they don't have to do science anymore, that they've relegated it to the science specialist. Now, I don't know how they think that 40 minutes of science instruction a week can possibly cover any sort of science, any sort of comprehensive science curriculum. But it doesn't. And then sometimes they get it twice a week, but it's still nowhere close to the instructional minutes that they get for math and language arts. So we are fighting for those instructional minutes just to get, let's just even get 30, but like 60 minutes a day of science would be perfect. And that is where students can really get into looking at inquiry-based science, being able to argue from evidence. And so many of our general ed teachers, they ask, okay, Leena, have you not seen our plates? We have to do reading workshop. We have to do writer's workshop, science of reading, this, that. I get it. Elementary teachers have a lot on their plate. And there has to be a way so that we're not choosing which subject should we teach today. It shouldn't have to be that way. We have to embrace interdisciplinary instruction.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I think about this all the time as someone that taught in middle school and high school for practically my entire career. I've always been in settings where all the subjects were departmentalized. So all I had to focus on was math. I never had to be in a position where I was a generalist, teaching all the subjects like most elementary school teachers. So I'm thankful for that. But my question to you is this: given what you just said, how much of this issue would you attribute to the fact that, we both came in the NCLB era where a lot of emphasis was on math and ELA, and then science was kind of put on the back burner? So it impacted scheduling, it impacted the way that we were looking at curricular plans and other aspects. So I'm wondering how much you would attribute this issue to the fact that math and ELA gets the lion's share of the instructional time generally throughout the school year.
100% because of that. And and I'm curious because, like you said, when before the NCLB era, I'm just trying to think of my schooling, and I remember getting science here and there. So I still don't remember that daily science instruction, but I do know that as soon as that No Child Left Behind standardized bubble testing hit, it was so much of math, math, ELA, and we saw it with our elementary schools getting hit the hardest.
You're right. Maybe as far as the amount of time allotted for each of the subjects, it might have been the same, but the feeling that you got as a child, at least for me, was all the subjects are important.
Yeah.
There was no subject that was more important than the other. Even if the instructional times weren't always equitable, we never got that impression. I think what's happened since NCLB is we need to give more emphasis on the math and the ELA, and we don't really need to focus on these other subjects because we're not being tested on them, which is just educational malpractice in my book.
Oh, absolutely, at its finest. And on top of that, teachers are choosing between social studies and science. So if you look through, you can go on a quick Pinterest a search for all of the different class schedules. You're lucky if science is even listed in a daily schedule. And if it is listed, it's either switched with social studies or science. And when you look at teacher education preparation, we're lucky if our generalists are getting any science teacher prep because so much of the focus is on math and ELA. And so on top of that, if you have your typical generalist, they may not have that many math or science courses in their the past courses that they've taken. Typically, if they do have a high math and science background, they end up becoming secondary teachers. So, like you and me, math and science. So, when you get the generalist that doesn't have that many math or that many science courses or for the preparation, then when it comes to the choice of whether to teach science or whether to teach social studies, there's going to be a gravitation to teach social studies or a non-STEM background.
So this season, Identity Talk for Educators Live will be including ad spots for businesses, products, and events that are adding significant value to their communities. And here's the catch. You don't have to be an educator or an education-based business to be a part of this. We're looking for people who are just doing great work in the community, and we want to use our platform as a way to amplify their work. So if you are an entrepreneur or you know of an entrepreneur who is doing just that, bring them in our direction. Have them reach out to us. If they want to learn more about their ad spots and how they can get themselves promoted on this platform, they can contact myself, Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. I'll say it one more time. It is Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. Hope to hear from you, and let's keep on amplifying our work and building each other up. Yeah. And that's exactly what happens more times than not. Now, I want to talk about representation for a second because, and I think social media has played a major role in making sure that we see more women of color in STEM, more men of color in STEM. I've been fortunate to have a few folks on the show who are in the STEM field as well, who do a lot of cool things on social media, like Dr. Yasmin Daniels. I think one of my favorites is Dr. Kelly Knight, who does a lot of work with forensic science. She's awesome. You got to connect with her. I think you love her. And there's so many others that are doing great work. I need to know, in your opinion, how can we use STEM as a vehicle, not just to drive that representation, but to create that culture of inclusion and belonging in our schools so that everybody believes that they can see themselves in a STEM field?
I love this question because it is the foundation of STEM for real and why we started. So when I was in, and I had to wait for all the way until 15th grade, so my third year as a college student, and I had my first African American teacher. My first African American STEM teacher, which was my professor, Dr. Tyrone Hayes from UC Berkeley, world renowned endocrinologist. And it was great to be able to see a Black man come in and so knowledgeable and knows his stuff. Why did I have to wait that long? Why did I have to wait that long to have representation of Black people in STEM? I know it exists. I know it's there. So what are we doing about our teacher pipeline? How are we recruiting people of color? And how are we recruiting Black teachers to ensure that we are being representative of our student population? And so when I was in Dr. Tyrone's class, he posed this question. He said, would we have a male birth control faster if we had more female researchers? And then he said, would we have a cure for sickle cell anemia faster if we had more Black researchers? And I mean, of course, in my head, it was a resounding yes. Why would a bunch of male researchers want to research male birth control? Like, that's not going to happen as quickly. And so that's when it got me thinking, and it was the wheels were turning for a long time, about a decade. Took me a decade to realize, you know what, as I came back in as an administrator in science, and I went in looking at our current curriculum, and I saw absolutely no diversity whatsoever. And I thought, well, I had to wait so long to see Dr. Tyrone as a Black, world renowned endocrinologist changing and saving the world. What if our kindergartners can see him? And that's where STEM for Real was born, where I wanted to showcase real life Black BIPOC scientists, engineers, doctors, whatnot. I wanted our young people to see themselves. And so we started off as a children's book, but then we realized, okay, it's going to take more than a children's book. We're going to have to redefine curriculum, instruction, identity, and really redefine what belonging means in the STEM classroom. So that's kind of how the backstory started with STEM for Real. And I really think, there's a charge for let's get posters of people of color and put them in the room. Okay. And let's go beyond that. Let's talk about what happens when it gets tough. How are we going to make sure that the Kwames stay in math and they persist, realizing that they belong in math. They belong in STEM. And how do we make sure that that persistence, it's listed in the standards of, being able to persist and being able to have those practices of mathematics. So what does that look like when we bring in identity?
I think when we look at DEI, the D part is the low hanging fruit. That's what we focus on a lot. Okay, let's put posters up on the board and let's make sure that we're meeting our quotas and things like that. That's all fine and dandy. But at this point, that just cannot be the ceiling. We got to focus on the E and the I, the equity and the inclusion. That
Yeah.
part is where we have to put the most focus on. So you mentioned a few things about curriculum, but I'm also wondering about teacher recruitment and retention, particularly those of color who are in the STEM fields. Is it a case where we need to look at our teacher prep programs at the different universities and create pathways for folks to teach STEM fields at the elementary and secondary level? Or is it going into some of the curricular agencies, like in the case of science? I know we have, next generation science standards, and we have other agencies that do focus more on curriculum, and we have to consult with them. Like, what is the priority at this time, in your opinion?
I have an answer, but my question for you is, how did you get into?
For me, I got into teaching because of the feeling that I got from working with kids. I started off working with kids at a YMCA near my university. Started off mentoring, and I liked the fact that I was able to have an impact on kids day to day, even if it meant doing it for 30 minutes to an hour and a half a day. Um, I just liked the fact that I was making a difference, and I wanted to maintain that feeling. And that's really what drove me to want to do it. And then also, most of the kids were Black and Latinx kids I was working with. So the fact that I was working with kids who looked like me
Yeah.
also drove me to want to get into this profession. So that's what I would say did it for me.
So that's perfect. And I think that would be the first step, is connecting with local nonprofits to see who their mentors are, and then getting those mentors on a pathway to teaching, whether it's through obtaining a career in technical education, a CTE credential, whether it's, I just learned about something called Rivet Education, where they help people in terms of their pathways to becoming a teacher. The next thing I would do is look at the para-educators that exist. There are para-educators that that would love to be a teacher, and then but they have to go through the degrees and the credentialing and everything. So setting up pathways for paraeducators to become teachers as well. And then this is wild to me. Every time I go to a job fair for teaching, I ask myself, where are the HBCUs? And if they're not there, how can we make sure that they get there? Let's talk to the teacher education programs at Howard, at Morehouse, and Spelman. Let's bring the teacher education programs here so that we can bring them to the job fairs and make sure that they're getting access to the potential careers that are out there in teachers, in teaching.
Awesome. And I want to make sure that we had time to talk about your upcoming book, STEM for All, which pretty much is speaking to all the things that we've been talking about thus far. How do we promote equity in our schools through STEM? How do we make curriculum culturally relevant in STEM? And speaking on the latter, I'm interested in learning about this case study student analysis because people have been raving about it and I want to hear it directly from you. How is that a tool to make STEM curriculum more culturally relevant? How is that used?
We, of course, we're biased. We love our case study student analysis. It is a huge pillar of our three-part framework: connect, create, cultivate. We start with connect, and that in that case study student analysis, we get to know our students, we get to know their families, we get to know what they like, what they dislike, their hopes and dreams, and we just get that ethnographic lens of who our students are. Now it's just 1 to 2. It's just 1 to 2 case study students, because every time I bring it up, the teachers ask, what do you mean? We have to do this with every single one of our kids? I mean, of course, that would be the ideal. However, I know that we don't have the time in terms of our capacity, but I know that we do have the time for 1 to 2 because I did it as a secondary teacher, and I know it's possible. And our pre-service, I was at Claremont Graduate University, and that's where they came up with the ethnographic student analysis. So I know all of our pre-service teachers that are out there, I know they have time too. And it's just 1 to 2, even if it's just 1 hour of getting to know your students and their families. And why we think it's so powerful is that then you're able to get this cultural capital that you can infuse into your lessons. So now if you're teaching about forces and interactions, and you find out that one of your little girls is a huge Simone Biles fan, now you can bring in gymnastics and
Mm.
show all of the forces and interactions that exist with all of Simone Biles and her gymnastics magic, essentially.
I mean, what you just shared is something that we've heard before, maybe not using the same language, but we talk about student interest surveys and questionnaires all the time. We've been talking about that for years.
Yes.
And for what you're saying, it's basically just an iteration of that. Obviously, there's more layers to it as well because we're looking at the different parts of identity that are attached to it. It just sounds like really good teaching practice from my end.
Right. And I know I have my mom is a counselor, and they have two counselors for over 400 students. How is that
Mm.
possible to reach every single one of those students? And that's where the teachers have to come in and be able to have those connections as well. And another thing, so it's funny, every time I talk about the book, I'm always compelled. We had multiple early reviewers, and they raved about it, which was great for my self-esteem. And there's always one that just was not okay. And I bring her up, him, her, I don't know. I bring this reviewer up because I think that there is a huge conception that has to take place in order to embrace STEM for all. And that is the mindset that you truly believe that every single student belongs in STEM. Because if you don't have that belief, my book can do wonders, but it can't do that much. You have to come up to the plate knowing that your student deserves to be in STEM. So this reviewer said, STEM is upper level higher thinking, synthesis of ideas to create new things. This means that struggling learners will also struggle with the rigor of the content. You can't just let students run on a little bit of information that is easy to understand and build a successful project. And that to me is not just damaging, it's scary, because this person is in front of our students with that mindset. And if you have the mindset that you are the gatekeeper and you decide who is upper level higher thinking and who isn't, that in and of itself is ensuring that STEM is not for all. And like I said, my book can do a lot, but it can't do that much.
Just the amount of bias that was embedded in those comments is problematic. It's just problematic. But that's the reality. We do have teachers who hold these beliefs, and we can only hope that this is a book that will allow them to dispel those beliefs and develop practices that will center children and get them to love STEM in the way that you and I do.
Absolutely. And you talk about some social media stars. One of my favorite social media stars is Raven, the science maven.
Yes,
And
she
she's
is awesome.
awesome. She actually wrote the afterword for the book.
Oh,
And
nice.
yes, yes. And I think, and I was very intentional about that because it's very, very important for our people, everyone in the education community to see a Black woman that is a molecular biologist communicating science. Because now our young people get to see her and say, wow, oh my gosh, she looks like me. She's a scientist. I want to be a scientist too. And more importantly, she shares many of the experiences that she had in terms of that fight. And you talk about this too, Kwame, about being about there's this fight of like, hey, I do belong here. And I feel like STEM is hard in and of itself. We shouldn't have to layer it with having to prove ourselves that we do belong here. It should just, have a place where, what if we all just belong? And then we can focus on like, persisting through mathematics issues or problems and coming together to solve difficult problems and ideas like that. That's the beauty of STEM.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree with that. And with when you're writing a book like STEM for All, you're not just talking about you or students who look like you. You're talking about every single student. And I would imagine that when you're writing this book, you're accounting for some of the barriers that they may encounter. You're also accounting for social, cultural barriers, economic barriers. There's a lot of things that you have to consider when you're writing a book of this magnitude. So, as a fellow author who had to go through a lot of those conversations with peer reviewers, with sensitivity readers, and everybody else, talk to me a little bit about that process of getting STEM for real to the finish line.
Ooh, I feel like we're still in it, and it's nice to be able to be at this place to talk about it. If you were to ask me 6 months ago, I'd be like, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
But it's I think the biggest part about the book is wanting to talk about the why for each part of our framework: the connect, the create, the cultivate. Being able to emphasize the importance of anti-racism and anti-bias and cultivating that conversation throughout the book. I think that was the most important part, is how you can't just pick and choose. Let's just start with create and just do the next generation science standards, or I'll just focus on the math practices chapter. No, this is about, you have to connect, then we create together, and then we can't just create a lesson and call it a day. We actually have to analyze student work, observe each other, and look at how our students are interacting with the lesson. Who's participating? Who is not participating? And why not? Like, having those difficult questions. Are our Black students participating? Are the girls participating? So being able to, really communicate the entire framework. And then also calling in Dr. Tyrone Hayes. He wrote the foreword for the book to show how important it is, where it doesn't just stop at K-12, where it continues on into higher education and the industry. So he was able to bring in that perspective. And then, of course, with Dr. Raven, the science maven, talking about the importance of science communication and what it means, how our journey doesn't stop here. We have to keep the conversation going. So I think putting that all together, and then it was nice, again, the validation from the reviewers, getting people to say, wow, I haven't seen STEM and equity talked about like this before. Because when we do talk about equity, it's, oh, well, I use sentence starters, and that really helps. Like, I think you should also address the systemic racism and the history of that has occurred, that has led to so many of these inequities. We have to address them. And I think that was another issue with our fragile reviewer, was that this person did not appreciate the history lesson.
Mm. But yet, it's that type of research that's necessary when writing a book like this. Like, I
Yeah,
know I had to go through my own share of research. And I'm talking about a whole lot of different historically marginalized groups where I don't even have the lived experience. And I'm supposed to be talking about them like I'm the representative. I'm like, no, I can't do that. I got to bring those stories in. I got to bring the people in to share the
right.
stories first person. So I just want to commend you for doing this because it's not easy, but you found a way to make it happen. And I'm just happy that the book is going to be out sooner rather than later. Uh, Before we wrap things up, couple questions. Number one, outside of STEM for real, or outside of STEM for all, what's next for STEM for real? Any upcoming projects that you'd like to share?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked. We're actually hosting the STEM for All Leadership Symposium, and that's going to be October 17th through 18th in the beautiful city of San Diego, California. And what we're doing is we're hosting this symposium to have teams of schools. So it would be a teacher and an administrator. And we're very intentional about that because we want teachers and administrators and instructional coaches all at the same decision-making table to understand the instructional pedagogy that's necessary and the systems that's necessary in ensuring STEM for all. So we're hoping that our administrators are able to have tough conversations on master scheduling and on tracking practices, suspensions, things like that. And then we're hoping that our teachers can have conversations around indigenous STEM practices, looking at the next generation science standards, the standards for mathematical practice, computer science, and being able to put that all together. So we really think that this is going to be a giant party of administrators, teachers, and coaches coming together and really looking at what does STEM for all look like for real. So we're excited about that. It's our first symposium, and that's going to be later on in the fall of 2024.
Awesome. And can people register right now for the
Yes,
symposium?
yes. Registration, I will share that as well. You can register online. You can even look up STEM for All Symposium, and I think it will show up.
All right. Sounds awesome. And then finally, how do you, Dr. Leena, stay true to the teacher in you?
I love this question. I love all your questions. I think for me, we've built in teacher observations into our design when we do professional learning with schools and districts. And many of our teachers ask us to model lessons. And so sometimes I want to make sure I'm not dusty. So I go in and I'm able to model some lessons, which is great. And I think it's very important for me to come to the reality that I am not a teacher and that I need to make sure, no matter how much experience I've had, no matter how many teachers that I work with, I am still at this moment in time, I'm not a teacher. I am out of the classroom. And so it is very important for me to keep that empathy lens on so that I can be the best advocate for our teachers and make sure that what I'm saying, I'm not just preaching on the side, that I want to make sure that I can walk the walk and talk the talk.
There you go. Dr. Leena, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an awesome conversation. And please let us know how the listeners and viewers can connect with you via social media or through the STEM for Real website.
Yes, definitely. You'll see all of our handles at STEM number 4 real. So you can see us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Sometimes I get a little creative with our reels. So you can follow that as well. And then of course our website www.stem number 4 real.org. And we have a lot of free resources as well. We have our own podcast where we'd love to have you on as well. And in addition to a website, we have a webinar called Creating Your Anti-Racist STEM Classroom, absolutely free. And then, of course, all of our podcast episodes, we've got sample lesson plans for you to try, and we have a sample lesson planner as well. But we would love to share the knowledge, the wealth, and really the commiseration in creating a community of STEM educators that are devoted to anti-bias and anti-racism.
Y'all heard it. And they could also register for the symposium through the STEM for Real website, correct?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
I will make sure I put that plug in there because people need to go to that symposium. Who wouldn't want to be in the Bay Area? Who wouldn't?
Actually, San Diego, but the Bay Area is great too.
Well, close to the Bay Area.
At least California, yeah.
There you go. At least you're there on the West Coast. All right. Well, Dr. Leena, again, thank you so much. And hopefully we can bring you back when the book is physically out and you can
Yes,
share more about it.
absolutely.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the audience.
All right. All right, people. So we're about to end another phenomenal episode of IDTALK for Educators Live. And as always, wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. We're going to do this again another time. Peace out, y'all.